Welcome to the Chaos Sector. We return to the Matrix. Everyone has seen the latest temper tantrum Obama has thrown. But, that shows desperation, and it's a bit too late for that anyway. Obama threw a hissy fit recently, basically scolding black men to go out and vote for Kamala Harris. Mr. Former President, it's mid-October. Harris was unofficially nominated back in July when old Joe stepped down. She has been running around, smiling, dancing, having rallies, celebrities endorsing her. You do know that black men were watching all of this, right? Meaning, they didn't get behind her then, and they definitely didn't get behind her when she sobered up and started talking about politics. You know this, Mr. Former President. I know it sucks to have a lame duck candidate, but you win some and you lose some. And in this case, it was actually a forfeit. Take it on the chin and come back stronger in 2028. Because it's over. Before we get into what he stated, we like to make fun of Gretchen Whitmer. What the hell is this lady doing? Does anyone remember the film Misery with Kathy Bates? Yeah, complete psycho. One minute she's smiling, then the next she has a freaking butcher knife in her hand. Every time you see Whitmer, think of the film Misery, because she is out of it. Of course, everyone is talking about the Doritos clip where Whitmer is feeding the chip to some wacky liberal. In a way, I don't blame Whitmer really. It's the wacky liberals that influence others to, quote, live a little. Now the backlash comes in suggesting that was a mockery of the Catholic religion. Some see it that way, while others claim it's some dumb trend on social media where people feed each other. Nevertheless, the optics of it gave off. I'm going to be honest here, it gave off, lesbians. Whatever floats your boat, Whitmer. It's just a distraction, though. She, of course, came out and apologized. To be honest, there's something about Whitmer that I find a bit intriguing. Sure, she's a wacko, but I think her loony persona comes from actually being quite successful as the governor of Michigan. Most politicians are not having this type of fun. And when you're doing a decent job, you do have time to clown around a bit with the people. And it does help with relieving the stress that comes with running a state. Gavin Newsom seen playing around, or Kathy Hochul in New York. And dare I say the governor of Illinois, J.B. Pritzker, is completely different. Their states are a complete disaster. It would look dismissive and out of touch with the nightmare that their states are experiencing. They don't have the luxury to have fun because there's too much work to be done, and to be honest, they have already decided not to do it. Whitmer is able to please both sides of the aisle, and the middle in the state. Leans more to the left for the liberals in the state. Leans to the center for the independents, libertarians, and even moderates on both sides, and peeks over to the right to please Republicans. Despite her wacky facial expressions and even wackier comments, Whitmer actually has a very good approval rating. Yeah, I know it may surprise a lot of people. Her approval rating is about 56%, which is quite impressive when you factor in the image of a lot of Democratic-run cities and states. And it's because she does listen to all sides of the table. Honestly, she's one of the few Democrats that we find to be more genuine than most. But she's still insane. Okay, now we address the man of the hour. Obama has recently said, "No more Mr. Nice Guy," and just unloaded on black men. Wow. Great way to push them further away from Harris, right? Quote, Obama tells black men it's not acceptable to sit out election. Former President Barack Obama on Thursday admonished black men who are hesitating to back Vice President Kamala Harris's presidential campaign, telling them it's not acceptable to sit out this election and suggesting they might be reluctant to vote for Harris because she's a woman. Okay, wait 1 minute. This was a very bad move. Well, it was a bad move to criticize black men altogether, but to play the gender card was a bad move. The striking comments by Obama, made to a small group of voters in a surprise stop at a local Harris campaign office in Pittsburgh, were part of a more forceful campaign message. The message was delivered by the former president Thursday, as polls continue to show a neck-and-neck race. At a rally in the city later that evening, Obama issued some of his most searing public criticisms of his successor to date. Quote, "The lack of energy some see around Harris's campaign seems to be more pronounced with the brothers. You're thinking about sitting out or supporting somebody who has a history of denigrating you because you think that's a sign of strength because that's what a man is, putting women down? That's not acceptable." Okay, I know people give high praise to Obama, but let's be honest, that was more about his historical presidency. Don't get me wrong, he's one of the best politicians in his own right, and the Democrats wish they could turn back the hands of time and have Obama running right now. But this was a bad move on his part. Yet it's just another example of the desperation of the Democratic Party. Let's continue. Quote, "You're coming up with all kinds of reasons and excuses. I've got a problem with that. Because part of me makes me think, and I'm speaking to men directly, Part of it makes me think that, well, you just aren't feeling the idea of having a woman as president, and you're coming up with other alternatives and other reasons for that. Unquote. Here's a thought. Why wouldn't Kamala Harris speak to those black men and express that same concern? You know why she couldn't do that? Here's the brutal truth, and it reveals the major problem. The reason she couldn't and will never feel comfortable speaking directly to black men is because, let's be honest, they are more focused and concerned politically than black women. So when addressing them, you have to mean what you say and say what you mean. Harris can't get away with the good vibes rhetoric. She can't get away with the Hollyweird Party Time USA rhetoric. You have to stand firm and show black men, who would be potential voters, that you are qualified for the job. With black women, well, not so much, because the sad truth is the very reason Kamala Harris is in this position is because of black women who literally didn't care about qualifications. Instead, the optics and power grabbing of having a black woman as vice president. And see, there's the separation between black men and black women. Referring back to a prior episode, CNN's Abby Phillip claimed that Republicans were trying to cause a wedge between black men and black women. This is naturally going to happen because they deal with politics completely different. I mean, it's something nobody really talks about, but it's hidden in plain sight. If you have over a 90% voting rate for Democrats as black women, then this means there is obviously a very low percentage of black men voting for Democrats. Some of it is lack of participation, and even that is understandable, because some of that lack of participation comes from knowing that politics is one big sham, and many of those black men focus on working and providing for their families, just like everyone else. In other words, voting is not symbolic for black men, and most men in general. It's based on results. Obama carrying the weight for Harris in speaking to those black men only magnifies why they aren't supporting her, you see? She doesn't have the balls or the ovaries to stand in front of those black men and speak her mind. Remember, she stated that she had to earn the black man's vote. Well, you haven't put forth an effort. Rather, Magic Johnson has been used to pitch to black men, and now Obama. It makes Harris look timid, afraid, not willing to confront those potential voters. Like an ex-girlfriend who cheated on her ex-boyfriend, she's afraid to come back for her dress shoes she left, or afraid to even be seen in the same area as her ex because she betrayed his trust. That's the relationship between black men and Kamala Harris. They don't trust her. Black men on social media quickly responded to Obama, and they let him have it. He only created the same narrative that Magic Johnson pushed, and old Joe Pryor. You're not black if you vote for a Republican. And you see, the slickness of Obama didn't and won't work on black men. He tried to make it seem as if black men are afraid to vote for a woman for president. They responded, pointing out that Harris is a train wreck of a candidate, and if she had anything fundamental to propose to the American people, they would consider voting for her. Obama knows she's a political airhead, but this is bigger than Harris. We'll get into that later. He wasn't finished. Obama had a bit more to say. Quote, at the rally, Obama delivered his most personal, furious indictment yet of Trump and a Republican Party he said is enthralled to a toxic character whose lies about storm relief over the last week marked a deep violation of Americans' trust. The idea of intentionally trying to deceive people in their most desperate and vulnerable moments. My question is, when did that become okay? Obama said, pointing to Trump's lies about the federal government withholding assistance to hard-hit Republican areas or siphoning off aid to give to undocumented immigrants. When a cheer rose up, he sharply quieted the room. Quote, I'm not looking for applause right now, Obama said, his voice vibrating with emotion, before he asked Republicans and conservatives allied with Trump, when did it become okay? Why would we go along with that? Unquote. Now, Obama has never been one to actually tell the truth, and we didn't expect him to do it now. He's slick, got a nice stockpile of WD-40, I must admit, but we're slicker. The speech may have been quite impactful from a political mudslinging perspective, but he will be fact-checked just like everyone else. I'll let my colleagues take it from here.
Great work. Gaslighting is not working. The American people know the truth, and Obama's scolding attack upon black men pretty much wrapped up Harris's campaign. It's basically foreshadowing what will happen when the votes come in and Trump is reelected. A huge percentage of votes from black men, which pretty much shows whose votes have the bigger impact in the black community. No offense to black women, but it's hard to give them the benefit of the doubt when they continue to vote for a party that has shown time and time again they ignore you after they've gotten your votes. And to make things worse, they reach over you and extend their hands to illegal immigrants who are not citizens of the country. Anywho, let's fact check Mr. Former President. Quote, Department of Homeland Security announces $300 million in direct funding to communities receiving migrants and $340 million for a new competitive awards process. Mr. Former President, I know you're busy living a great life after politics, but surely you keep up with what's going on. This is not misinformation. This is not disinformation. This is from FEMA's website. Quote, Today, the Department of Homeland Security through FEMA and the U.S. Customs and Protection announced $300 million in grants through the Shelter and Services Program, which was authorized by Congress to support communities that are providing services to migrants. Okay, does everyone see what this says? I'm sure you do. Let's continue. $275 million will be distributed in the first allocation, and the remaining $25 million will be allocated later in the year to accommodate evolving operational requirements. Wait, you know what evolving operational requirements means? Well, we'll just have $25 million sitting there. Anywho, the initial funding will be available to 55 grant recipients for temporary shelter and other eligible costs associated with migrants awaiting the outcome of immigration proceedings. Additionally, DHS is announcing $340.9 million through the Shelter and Services Competitive Grant Program to be allocated before the end of the fiscal year. Unquote. Now, although this isn't entirely FEMA's spending, they definitely have the majority of that spending. FEMA stands for Federal Emergency Management Agency. Its main focus is centered around natural disasters that impact the country, such as hurricanes, floods, power outages, and the like. For this agency to spend money on immigrants when that is not technically their responsibility shows how left the federal government has become. It is not FEMA's job to fund anything towards immigration. That's the local, state, and federal government's job to fund this issue. FEMA's job is to ensure that they will have enough emergency funding when disasters hit. Treating their funds as, quote, evolving operational requirements, in case there is something that may be more devastating or catastrophic than projected or expected to be, but they make sure they have it for migrants. Oh, okay. Old Joe and Kamala Harris and wacky Congress members were just burning dollars in their little inflation campfire. And that included helping immigrants throughout the country. They already were receiving hotels, groceries, local, state, and federal government assistance. I mean, what about the American citizens? Mayorkas comes out and claims FEMA doesn't have any more money, and immediately was blasted about the very money FEMA spent on immigrants should have been allocated for the disasters that FEMA is in the business of working to combat. And we have to include illegal immigrants into that equation. So it's a fact that FEMA spent the federal emergency aid on migrants, and that's why Mayorkas claimed they were out of money. And they wouldn't have been out of money if they hadn't given it to non-citizens. That's not their job. But what do you expect with corrupt politicians? Mayorkas is the director of Homeland Security, right? Okay, this same person in a congressional hearing was asked by Ted Cruz about the illegal immigration crisis. Cruz pulled out colored wristbands, which were placed on migrants by drug cartels. Each color represented how much money they owed the cartels. When Cruz asked Mayorkas did he know what those wristbands represented, Mayorkas stated he doesn't know. Now, here you have the director of the Department of Homeland Security who doesn't know what's going on at the border, doesn't know the operations of the drug cartels that smuggle migrants into the country, and yet is in charge of Homeland Security? What in the world is going on here? Well, he does know what the colored wristbands represented, but he couldn't admit to it because that would mean he also knows that children were being smuggled in by the drug cartels, which the administration also knew about, and they all sat back and let it happen, so he would rather appear naive to it than to have knowledge of it. Goes back to our breakdown. Deceptive people would sacrifice their intelligence to cover up the truth. In other words, Mayorkas would accept looking completely oblivious to those operations at the border, and yet he's the director of Homeland Security. Insanity. And guess when this person became the director? In 2021. This is old Joe's selection. But it's odd because he also was a deputy secretary at the department in the Obama administration. And we all know Obama shipped illegals out quicker than anyone, even Trump. So how do you explain the ideological shift here? Well, we touched on it earlier. And guess who's in charge of FEMA? Deanne Criswell, who was sworn in by Mayorkas in 2021. Oh yes, they're all a part of this administration. But now that I think about it, Harris was told by this man to ignore the border. She's still responsible and could have shown a backbone for once, but the border crisis lands at the feet of this psychopath. Yet the bigger point here is that FEMA, or shall I say Mayorkas, is responsible for not having the emergency funds for disaster aid for American citizens. and giving $750 per household is really disgraceful. It's not $750 per person, no, it's per household. Yet they can allocate $25 million for migrants in, quote, evolving operational requirements. They had the money, didn't want to spend it in helping the American people, claimed they ran out of money, and asked Congress to give more, essentially stealing money. And the reason they would do such a thing is to make sure they will keep the money, such as the $25 million they have set aside, to keep funding a problem they are not supposed to be funding. Oh, wait, I guess FEMA is responsible for funding services for immigrants, since that is one of the major emergencies in the United States. But it's self-inflicted, and it's not the American citizens' fault. There are millions of immigrants that have been dumped into the country under this administration. I'm done.
Well said. It's all blowing up in their faces. Mayorkas should have been impeached because he was complicit with allowing millions of illegal immigrants into the country. And Deanne Criswell should also be investigated for, quote, mishandling FEMA funds for disaster relief. She claimed recently that FEMA has enough funds for a recent hurricane, but not for the rest of the year. Again, this is almost a form of extortion, to be honest, because the plan is to keep asking Congress for money. And what this is doing is pulling from the Federal Reserve, which will obviously create a larger deficit. And this could also increase inflation. The federal government extorting the federal government? Sounds crazy, but desperate times call for desperate measures. I see the bigger picture here. Create an economic nightmare for the Trump administration, affecting his ability to carry out his economic policies. Mind you, these are the think tanks behind closed doors. They know Trump is getting reelected. They knew that as soon as he decided to run again. Heck, they assumed he would run again after the prior election. Knowing that old Joe was a one-term president and no other Democrats had the courage, experience, or popularity to run against Trump, they were stuck with old Joe, and then they pulled the plug. And because there was not a Democrat that stepped up to the plate to challenge Harris, she was the pick, which everyone knows. Even Democrats didn't really think she was qualified to be vice president, let alone the presidential candidate. What I'm breaking down here is that the elite knew Trump was returning and would more than likely be reelected. And knowing this, they have been burning money in their inflationary campfires, saying to themselves, hey, Trump will get reelected, but he's going to spend most of his term cleaning up our trash after we leave. They may win the battle, but Trump will win the war. And that war is for the American people. Obama knows this and will insult black men, showing how desperate Democrats have become in keeping the black vote. Because we can suggest that if black men are the reason Trump gets reelected, then either black women follow their political influence, which is based on policies and principle, or there will be an internal war between black men and black women politically, similar to how liberals and conservatives fight. Which segues to that issue, the end of an illusion.
Democrats have been trying to hold on to the black vote forever. But it's a bit misleading because they already have the black vote and will continue to have the black vote, just not the black man's vote. In other words, they will continue to get 90% of support from black women. Yet the problem presenting itself for Democrats is black men have become more visible and vocal politically ever since Donald Trump has popped up on the scene. And this is almost like a new voting bloc within the black community. As mentioned before, Kamala Harris can't speak to black men because they are actually focusing on what she is proposing in relation to what Trump is proposing. Trump has a proven record of generating a stable economy, giving tax cuts to the American citizens who benefited with an increase in income and take-home pay. Many highly politicized the First Step Act that his administration passed, but it benefited many black men who were given a second chance in life to pursue their goals, re-enter society and be productive citizens, and also build stronger communities. Black men were thankful for that second chance. Trump also invested in small businesses. He restored the annual funding for HBCUs, which was facing a potential deep financial collapse, including staff cuts and programs being terminated. Although he didn't invest as much as the current administration, he took the initiative to restore the annual funding. And more so, Democrats like to fight with money, not with morality. So although they invested billions of dollars compared to what Trump invested, the initiative he took is what convinced old Joe and Harris to ride his coattails on it. Black men, many young black men in college, were thankful for that. Many black men who were staffers and program directors were thankful for that. But Kamala Harris in her presidential campaign, with all of her proposals, hasn't addressed black men and what she will do to gain their support.
We have breaking news. Kamala Harris is apparently making a last effort to gain a certain vote in a recent economic proposal centered at helping black men. ABC reports, quote, Vice President Kamala Harris is announcing a plan to give black men more economic opportunities and other chances to thrive, as she works to energize a key voting bloc that has Democrats concerned about a lack of enthusiasm. Harris's plan includes providing forgivable business loans for black entrepreneurs, creating more apprenticeships, and studying sickle cell and other diseases that disproportionately affect African American men. Harris already has said she supports legalizing marijuana, and her plan calls for working to ensure that black men have opportunities to participate as a national cannabis industry takes shape. She also is calling for better regulating cryptocurrency to protect black men and others who invest in digital assets. The vice president's so-called opportunity agenda for black men is meant to invigorate African American males at a moment when there are fears some may sit out the election, rather than vote for Harris or her opponent Republican former President Donald Trump. The vice president unveiled the plan Monday, ahead of an evening campaign rally in Erie, Pennsylvania, where she was to appear with Democratic Senator John Fetterman. Her push comes after President Barack Obama suggested last week that some black men aren't feeling the idea of having a woman as president. Unquote. So this is her plan, you guys. I don't see much that would make a difference. What does everyone think?
More of the same, nothing tangible. To take a line from Trump, why didn't you propose this earlier? Why did it take Obama for you to all of a sudden look to black men for support? It's just a desperate attempt to gain their votes, when you should have been proposing this months prior, not 2 weeks before the presidential election. It really makes her look desperate to get her ex-boyfriend back. But he's moved on. You didn't value his opinion. You didn't value his genuine approach to politics. You didn't value his class and how he presented himself politically. You overlooked him, treated him like his vote didn't matter, as long as you had your best friend in Shaniqua's vote. So, stay single with your best friend Shaniqua, and let the ex-boyfriend live his life without you begging for forgiveness.
And it's very condescending and insulting if you really break that down. Harris associates the black culture with marijuana. So, let's legalize it in hopes that we'll draw a lot of black men to vote for us. Yeah, flat out despicable. Eureka! And I have another plan for you, black men. Are you ready for this? I am working to ensure you have the opportunities to participate in the cannabis industry. How's that? You like that? You sell marijuana, right? Aren't you tired of getting arrested for it? In my administration, we will decriminalize it and offer business opportunities for you to sell it legally. On a side note, I will also work to decriminalize prostitution. So all of the pimps out there, you don't have to worry about getting arrested anymore. You can legally manage your sex workers in the communities. And I'll even offer up to $20,000 for your startup business in sex work. Isn't that great? Give me a high five, my brothers. The black community should close the door on Harris and leave her in the cold, just like Democrats have done to them for ages. And whoever is drafting this crap up, because we know it's not Harris, should be fired immediately. I guess this is where the small business loans for black men come into play, right? Yes, let's give them business loans to start up their own cannabis business. Yeah, that'll help solve the problems in the black community. Never mind investing in workforce programs or an increase in federal grants for college tuition. No, we don't want black men to pursue their goals the right way. We want them to wallow in the lower half of society, investing in selling marijuana to their communities. This is just, I'm so appalled by how the Harris campaign is this delusional. I mean, if she had proposed one thing, and one thing only, that being an increase in federal grants for college tuition through the same damn opportunity agenda plan for black men, she could have gained some ground. But of course, she decides to go the other route, further in left field, and just propose to make life more precarious for black men and their families. I think it's a combination of Harris naturally being ultra-progressive and also being ultra-ignorant, because anyone with common sense would say, there are better proposals than this. Let's focus on education. Let's focus on the workforce, the two driving factors of building a great future. I'm disgusted, and many people may not like how Trump describes her, calling her stupid and such. But it's true, she is not that smart, my friends.
It's so horrible. Harris should be impeached from office at this very moment. First of all, you know what, it's not even worth my tape, just pathetic. As I was saying, back to the episode, black men have viewed her interviews and came to the same conclusion as everyone else, who doesn't suffer from Trump derangement syndrome, and that is this person should not be running for president. That rally in Flint, Michigan was perhaps the end. The teleprompter malfunctions and listening to that silence It was like someone died. It was like a musician getting caught lip syncing at a concert as the music skips during the performance. And when that was discovered the first time in history, that artist was humiliated in front of thousands of people. Similar to Harris at that moment, she had an outer body experience level of humiliation. It was bonkers. And she kept repeating 32, waiting for the teleprompter to return, and everyone saw a candidate that doesn't have any real tangible message. And what's more insane is there are claims that she has been using teleprompters in these so-called interviews with celebrities and talk show hosts. And the latest claim is Harris used a teleprompter at a town hall event hosted by Univision, which was another fail. Ambitions, dreams, and aspirations never sounded so annoying as much as Harris repeats those exact words every time. A Hispanic man said they're leaning towards voting for Trump and wanted Harris to explain how she was elected, and Harris's word salad basically translated to, well, if that's how you feel, then you have every right. I mean, it seems like we're being a bit harsh on Harris, but she unlocked the door to being ridiculed, as with shows such as The Gutfield Show or Lefties Losing It on Sky News. If you keep doing or saying outrageous crap, you're only giving political satire and criticism material. Stop making a fool of yourself. And that's what Harris has been doing this entire time. Her campaign staff doesn't know what they're doing. The Democrats have threw her out there into the fire. Her campaign staff and advisors are letting her stumble around. Nobody is there to guide her and tell her don't go on a podcast and talk about legalizing marijuana. The left thinks these issues are how they relate to younger generations and those who align with that lifestyle. But Harris is not working as a social political activist who discusses these issues on podcasts or in debates. She's running for president of the United States, damn it. Instead of pitching to legalize marijuana, when asked about it by the host, say something like, well, it's a complex topic as a significant portion of society approves of it being legalized, but there are consequences to decriminalizing it. Although in general there isn't really a negative impact on physical health, marijuana does affect mental health. As we all know, many youth drop out of high school due to drug use, which marijuana is the leading cause of that. In college, the same effect. We all remember the movie Friday with Craig, getting fired on his day off from work. It was hilarious, but it's a prime example of how individuals make poor decisions under the influence of marijuana. Many people have quit their jobs or been fired due to smoking marijuana. And we need more people employed to build that generational wealth I talk about. So when we're talking about our youth, especially in the Black community and also adults, we do not want to advocate the push for legalization as much because it does have very serious consequences in life. It destroys ambition, dreams, and aspirations. And for the future of our nation, for the future of our youth who strive to become the next millionaire in their family, or the next billionaire, or the next inventor that will revolutionize the age of technology, it's imperative that we weigh the pros and cons of this topic before we make a decision that may potentially destroy those ambitions, dreams, and aspirations of the American dream. You see, and the host would gain respect for Harris, even though they would want marijuana legalized. And more so, they would acknowledge her as a serious presidential candidate, as opposed to some lady who lacks serious bones in her body. But this is pandering too much into what she thinks people want to hear, as opposed to standing on a fundamental set of principles and morality. Harris and her team just decides, oh, let's go on Steve Colbert's show and drink beer, when she's already dealing with speculations that she is an alcoholic. Don't provide actual justification for that speculation by chugging beers on national television. It makes you look careless, aloof, blissfully ignorant to how the American people are perceiving you. But because she has a liberal view of the world, she thinks this is perfectly fine, or it makes her look relatable. It does not make you look relatable. It makes you look careless. This wouldn't be a problem if this was in 2025 after the presidential election. Trump had won, and Harris just had a good time after her presidential bid. That's okay, No harm, no foul. She's somewhat celebrating. But to do this while you're currently campaigning and dealing with massive scrutiny about your lack of message to the nation, it's pathetic. And Colbert doesn't really care about Harris's reputation and how that affects her election. He works for a network that is in the business of boosting ratings. That's all they truly care about, despite their so-called political allegiance to Democrats. The entertainment industry is not truly behind any political party, really. They shift to what generates the most revenue for their companies. And Harris, not really grasping she's being used by the network to boost ratings, is once again blissfully ignorant. Or what about her guest appearance on the Howard Stern show? A guy who made a name for himself being the nation's creepiest radio show host. Sure, he's gotten older and more sophisticated, But what benefit does Harris gain by going on his show? Well, Howard Stern, of course, is Jewish, and there are wars in the Middle East right now. So that's why he wanted to probe her brain about a variety of issues. But again, this is at the expense of Harris for Stern's benefit. And even more, Stern stated he is voting for Harris, but he would also vote for a wall instead of Trump. That was an insult to Harris, and I don't think she picked up on it. All of these appearances have been epic failures, because now is not the time to allow yourself to be ragdolled to all these medians, to the benefit of those companies. If you want to be the president of the United States, you make sure there is demand for respect, civility, and genuine discourse to share with the American people. But all these appearances had no benefit to her campaign. It hurt her image overall, and everyone has come to the conclusion that Harris is just enjoying the moment in the spotlight, like some internet sensation. And see, that's the thing. The appearances she should have ditched, she didn't, and the one she definitely should have attended being the congressional speech by Israel's prime minister. Oh, she ditches that and attends a sorority event. It's her choices, in which she doesn't truly grasp that what she considers social political allies, such as those medians, may be allies, but you're running for president, and you have to think about your image to the American people, not to your Hollywood fan club. Because while you're appealing to their ratings, you're simultaneously dismissing the American people by not giving them substance. Every interview has been a disaster because there is no actual fundamental message. Aspirations, dreams, and ambitions is not a policy, and the policy she has proposed goes right to the national deficit and inflation. And when asked how will she pay for the projected $3 trillion, her economic plan will cost the Federal Reserve. Oh, the rich need to pay for it. That's socialism, and this is why there is no detailed economic policy. It's just the rich need to pay their fair share. No, we asked how will you pay for your plan? Because if you're putting that at the feet of the wealthy and corporations, then let's have them run for president then. How about that? You see, and this is why Harris ran behind the curtains when it came to speaking to black men. Because they represent principle, hard work, dignity, and that blissful demeanor she has indicates that she doesn't take anything seriously, and her actions justify that. Harris decides to have others do the lifting for her, but want those black men to vote for her? Oh, hey, could you guys tell black men to vote for me? I'm kind of busy right now. I'm dealing with, my therapist calls it, fear. Magic Johnson tries to pull black men in. Nothing changed. Then Obama was called in to influence black men to support her, and he actually made things worse. It magnifies that she can't get the job done because he is bringing about a higher standard of a presidential candidate, asking black men to vote for a lower standard candidate. They're not budging, no matter how loud he shouts and complains. Obama knows his pleas are futile because those very black men were critical of him during his administration, especially black men in Chicago, his hometown. So there's nothing Democrats can do to prevent black men from voting for Trump. Also non-white men as well, such as Hispanic men and Mexican-American men. And don't be fooled, most of them will not be sitting out this election. They will in fact vote. And another thing that is happening, which is unfortunate for women, is she is doing a very terrible job of representing women. It's not really being discussed, but from a historical perspective, Harris is doing worse than Hillary Clinton, who was completely covered in corruption and low energy. Harris is not as quick on the draw at 60 years old, like she was when she was in her 30s and 40s. Understandable, everyone ages differently. Some actually get better with age in how they communicate. Others start to decline. But unfortunately, the lack of Harris's ability to just speak her mind and articulate a message that is sound and clear indicates that she is not sure of what her plan is, which makes her look lost and confused in her own presidential campaign. That's astonishing. And that is being placed center stage, with her opponent in fact flinging these insults her way. It's Trump, he's going to say things that are not politically correct. But do the American people agree with his take on Harris? That's the question. And so far, she hasn't given any evidence that Trump is wrong. The more she speaks, the more she looks confused, and the American people do not want to vote for someone who is lost and confused. Trump, on the other hand, they know which direction he is driving and his destination. Harris is looking at her GPS, trying to figure out which direction she should be going, but not having a destination. And to add insult to injury, she has a car full of passengers expecting her to know what the hell she's doing. Instead of asking, "Are we there yet?" they're asking, "Do you know where you're going? F this, let's get out of the car." All in all, she had her fun, just running around being an empty shell for Democrats, but it's time to call it a night. I just wish she would do that already. Concede defeat and walk out with a bit of dignity. Some would disagree, claiming she folded. and such. I think most people would respect her for that decision because all she's doing is adding layers of embarrassment. This is the chaos sector.